All right, perfect. Awesome. All right, so the live feed from the webcam showing me in the office. That's good. So then we're going to get going. So thank you very much, guys, for joining in. Really appreciate it. I'm going to start a little screen share with the agenda that we've got here. So here to talk about playbooks. Dun, dun, dun. Obviously something that we're pretty excited about, that we got going with here at Tungsten a little while back, and just really blown away with how well it's gone for us with the rollout. I had a lot of reservations and concerns, but we've been able to overcome those, and that's really what I want to share with you guys today. So my buddy Kevin helped me aptly name this webinar, How to Get Started with Playbooks in 5 Simple Steps. So we're going to get started in on that. And the basic idea of the webinar is this is a bunch of stuff that I learned the hard way, and I'm hoping will really help you to get started with this. So a quick agenda of what we're going to try to cover. The goal of the webinar is really to show the how to do the what of Dan's awesome playbook framework. So I'm going to be sharing some of our best practices all the way from debate to long-term adoption. I'm going to show you some screenshots of the gamification that we've put in place around playbooks here internally at Tungsten, as well as a few of our own playbooks, which we've developed internally. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the resistance around playbooks and how that relates to the how. So actually, before we do that, we'll talk a little bit about, we'll give you a quick highlight of what the 5 steps are going to be. So we got debate and socialization, metrics and gamification, choosing the champion, experimentation, adoption, and improvement and adoption. So these are the 5 steps that when we take a look at how playbooks really worked well for us here at Tungsten, and we took Dan's idea and rolled it out, this is kind of like the 5 steps that we distill down that we really think are the secret sauce that gave us the key to making this really work. So we all know that Dan says playbooks are awesomeness. I was really hooked when I heard about this for the first time, but you know, I've talked about playbooks now with several companies because I don't just have my own company. I also work as an advisor and mentor to several other companies. And I kept hearing the same sort of challenges that people are throwing at me. So what are the challenges that people commonly talk about when we think about playbooks? Well, usually what we hear is, you know, companies say to me, why can't I just build a wiki, right? Why do I need to roll out playbooks? Because I just want my people to know what it is to do, and I can build a little wiki. I don't need some of that, all those other tools. But really, that's only a third of what you need. See, what's cool about Dan's playbook framework is it has 3 sections, right? You've got reference, processes, and systems. So a company wiki could really be compared to the reference section, which tells you about the what that's going on in your company, but it's not telling you anything about the how. Another common concern that we had about playbooks as I'm talking to people is that it's going to create too much bureaucracy in your company. And this is something that I absolutely hate. Most of the companies that I advise are also doing everything they can to avoid it. And they also feel like it's going to make them go slow, right? If somebody has to keep referring to a playbook every time they launch a task, how is that not going to slow them down? In fact, even internally, as we debated about whether or not we should really adopt this in our company, some of our leadership really pushed back with exactly these complaints. So if any of these challenges resonate with you, I want you to know that I know how you feel, because that's exactly what came up in my own company, is some of these complaints. So why was I really interested in rolling out playbooks? So it really starts with a story about the people that we have working at Tungsten. See, we have a lot of smart people working here at Tungsten. That's a little cube of tungsten, in case you're wondering. There's a nice little story behind how we chose Tungsten as the name of the company, but I digress. I'll share that another time. But we would say, you know, you're a smart person. We hired you because you're smart, and that means that you're just going to figure it out. So there'd be very little onboarding that was going on in a company. We'd say, you know, you'll figure it out on your own. But honestly, this was causing a lot of inefficiency because people would end up spending too much time figuring out how to do something. They'd make a lot of the same mistakes that others before them had made. And then that was just wasting a ton of time because they're walking around creating their own processes. but nobody's really picking up where anybody else left off. It's almost like we're starting from scratch every single time. So basically what was happening is I was getting really frustrated because I could see the communication and handoff of tasks in the company, especially between departments, it was getting really clunky. And that would lead to a lot of finger pointing. So whenever something would go wrong, we do a 5 whys, an idea that came out of lean startup, which is very popular with a lot of entrepreneurs. We'd sit down, we'd do a 5 why analysis, and people get all excited, right? You get to the end of the 5 whys, there's this big champagne moment when we finally figured out what went wrong. But then 3 months later, no one remembers that big exciting takeaway from that 5 whys, right? And then someone else, someone new usually, comes in and makes the exact same mistake again. And honestly, this was really starting to impact our relationship with customers, and it was definitely slowing us down. So enter Dan's playbooks. How we got started on this is I was at Mastermind Talks, and this is Dan dropping some knowledge bombs. The round table that Dan was hosting, ironically, was about how to integrate your executive assistant into your life like Richard Branson does. But as we're sitting here kind of like doing a Q&A and Dan's bobbing and weaving with the questions, the conversation takes this drastic right turn into playbook land. And everyone's like keying in on playbooks and asking them questions about playbooks. And honestly, this was the pivotal moment for me. I'm so happy there's a picture in there. I'm just off the camera to the left, so you can't actually see me there. But I'm like furiously scribbling down notes. And I'm like, this is potentially the solution to exactly what it is that I'm struggling with in my company right now. I've got all these really, really smart people. Why is there so much inefficiency in my company? But at the same time that I was listening to Dan, I was feeling really overwhelmed. Because as much as you want to do this, the first thing that's coming into your mind, as I'm sure it probably does in most of yours, is how the heck am I going to do this? How am I going to roll out playbooks in my company? So that's really what I want to share with you guys now, this framework, which again, after interviewing and having lots of conversations internally talking about what went right with playbooks as well as what went wrong, these are the 5 things that we can really distill down. And I know that Dan teaches in his webinar framework that you're supposed to distill it down to 3, but I couldn't do 3. I had to do 5. So here we go. We're going with 5. So the very first one is debate and socialization. So what exactly does that mean? Well, when I first brought the idea to leadership at Tungsten, my COO was the first one to say, yeah, whatever. I mean, this happens a lot with ADD entrepreneurs. We go out to all these different events and we come back with these different ideas. And I noticed that now the initial resistance is like to say, yeah, okay, we'll see if you're really serious, Darryl, by just saying, yeah, whatever. And only if I come back to it again and again and again, do people start to take it seriously. So as I mentioned it a second time and a third time in our stakeholder meetings, and people started to realize that I was actually pretty serious about this playbook thing, the objections started coming up. So the first objection that my COO came up with, which I thought was a really good one, is there are no cogs allowed in our company. Therefore, if the work that we can do can be put into a playbook, then the people doing that work don't belong in our company, because we don't have people in our company doing that kind of easy work. My retort to that was, exactly. They're doing the work because it takes smart people to figure it out and do it right with no mistakes. But if they create a playbook for it, then we can out-task it and get that busy work completely out of our company. And that was a really important sort of first pivotal moment as we're discussing this internally, as we realized, yeah, the work that we're doing is complicated, but it doesn't need to be complicated. If we create a playbook around it, we can actually start to out-task it to Fiverr, to Upwork, to other outside consultants. And that started to kind of get some initial excitement. Then a few other people on the team, as we started to kind of socialize it. Now my COO is, kind of warming up to this. He's standing next to me. A few other people on the team say, exactly like I said in the challenge earlier, this is going to introduce too much overhead into the company. And just so you know how important this is to us, we have 4 core values here at Tungsten, which we co-curated. And we really hire and fire according to those values. And nothing new gets introduced into the company unless it's in harmony, aligned with those values. And anything that's contrary to the values is absolutely rejected. So our 4 core values is we are good people, we are testers, we are efficient, and we are agile. And as we're having this discussion with leadership people, they're like, well, Playbook sounds like it's going to violate 2 of our core values. It's very much contrary to being agile, because they believed that it was going to create all this bureaucracy. And there's no way that it's going to help us to be more efficient, because it's going to slow us down. As it turns out, though, it actually had the complete opposite effect. Playbooks are allowing us to go faster with less overhead. See, because now we're making less mistakes, and everybody is much more free to apply their time and energy to more creative work. And when our people do creative work, it makes them happier and gives the company a higher ROI. So we both quickly realized that by allowing our smart people to share what they know, we not only increase quality, but also identify what in our business is rote, right? So that we can get rid of that by out-tasking these highly optimized processes. I mean, just go to the outsourcer and just give them the playbook, right? So now we've started to get leadership around this, and we've had some debates, and this is a really important step. I'm taking a little bit of time on this one because I want you to understand that you can't just wave a magic wand and feel like playbooks are going to happen. If you're a company of 2 or 3, maybe you're not going to have as much of this debate and socialization. But in a medium-sized company, like we have 31 employees down here on the main floor with me, plus a call center upstairs with another 95 employees. We really just roll out playbooks for the team down here. But 31 is kind of like a medium-sized business, and hopefully some of these challenges will resonate with you if you've got a company about that size, or maybe even a little bit smaller. So we got leadership on board, right? That's the first step. And there's been all these debates and hashing things out, and this is taking days and sometimes weeks. Then comes the socialization. The key piece here is you want to make the rollout official, right? You don't want to just sort of softly roll it out where one day everyone wakes up and playbooks seem to be creeping around them all over the place. You want to really make a big announcement. You got to rally the troops, and you want to explain to them why this is going to be good for them. And I can't emphasize enough that this is, I think, arguably one of the most critical pieces that made Playbooks a success. And as we go through the rest of the framework, you'll hear me kind of referring back to this one piece about getting buy-in from people. So how do you get buy-in from people on playbooks? How do you convince them that this isn't just going to be bureaucracy and overhead, right? The first thing you got to say to people, from my experience, is you're smart. That's why you're here. But one of our core values is that we're good people, which means that if you're smart and you're good, you should share what you know. Help your teammates to play at a higher level. We do that by putting what we know into playbooks. So you see that subtle twist? Now whoever's creating the most playbooks is the person who's living the values the most. They're the good person inside of the company. The more playbooks you create, the more you're being a team player, the more you're helping people out, the more you're validating to everyone around you that you're a smart person. Because if you weren't a smart person, you wouldn't be the right person to create the playbook, would you? So this is the first place where gamification starts to creep in, right? We're not quite into the gamification section yet, but this is where we kind of laid the foundation for gamification, which I know a lot of you guys were really excited about the gamification piece and you wanted to hear more about that. But gamification started where we said, everyone who creates the most, we told everyone that the person who creates the most playbooks is obviously the smartest and the best team player in the company. That positioning, that sort of twist, was really, really key to getting adoption to sort of take off. And this changes playbooks from being a boring chore into being a way to show that they're interested in helping the team. So that simple positioning really changes everything. So the key takeaway from this first piece of the foundation, right? This is really the foundation that you're laying for the frameworks. The key takeaway from that is that getting this rolled out is going to take a lot of energy. Don't get it twisted. You got to be prepared to put in the work in order to create that initial momentum. It's probably not going to be just 1 or 2 conversations. You're going to have to really plan it out. And the way that you position this to your staff can make or break you. So the second thing, we're going to get through some of these other ones a little bit more quickly, but metrics and gamification. So we really love the book Scaling Up in our company. It's something that pretty much everybody in the company has read. And everyone who attends the different stand-ups and meetings in our company is really familiar with the language from that book. One of the ideas from that book that we apply is to have different quarterly themes for our business. So depending on what the quarterly theme is, our culture team then goes and has posters designed and printed to hang around the office so that the theme is kind of like right there in everyone's face. And everyone knew that after we decided to roll out playbooks, that the theme for that quarter was going to be playbooks. So this is an actual picture of the pit in our office. And you can notice that poster over there on the right, TRC playbooks on the right track. So you can see again, the level of commitment and the rollout that we're doing to actually go and have the posters designed and then send them off and print them, hang them around the office. Everybody knows this is our focus. We're serious about it. Everyone's got to get on board, right? So that was one really important thing. Another really important concept from scaling up though is rocks, or the primary metrics and numbers that we're shooting for, so that we know if we've gotten the desired results out of our quarter. You can say, okay, we're going to set playbooks as a theme, but what are the key numbers that we're going to be able to measure to let us know whether or not we've done a good job? So you'll notice right there on the screen, what is it showing? Playbook edits. That's one of the rocks that we identified as being really critical to making playbooks work properly in the companies. How often are they being edited? Another one, well, there's a few others here and I'm going to show some of these, but you can get the idea, is that these TVs around the pit, they actually scroll every few seconds through these different screens. And I'm going to explain a little bit later how we actually do this and how you can do it as well in your company. But most playbooks created, most views on their playbooks, all these kinds of gamification, we have 3 or 4 different charts that kind of scroll across the screen showing how many are being created. And just going back to that, I mean, who doesn't love to see a line moving from the lower left to the upper right like that? Again, this is about creating momentum. Everyone's looking at this and they're like, wow, there's a lot going on with playbooks in the company. This is their theme, but stuff's going on. What am I doing about playbooks? Am I getting involved? So here are some of the key texts that came out of these. For example, most playbooks created. So you can see Amy, 31 playbooks created. Ayelet in second place, Mahmood in third place. Most views on their playbooks. Again, if you're creating value, if you're a smart person who's creating really good value to the company, probably your playbooks are going to be the ones that are viewed the most. So we had this gamification idea around how many views are you getting on your playbooks, right? Again, this is motivating everybody to be like, I want my playbook to be the best, the baddest, with the most value, the one that people use the most. How many edits on their playbooks? Now, edits is a really important piece. So I want to stop and talk about this for a second. One of the key ideas to getting playbooks going is we said to people, please, please, please don't feel like your playbook needs to be perfect on the first try. Don't spend an hour trying to create your first playbook. Spend 5 minutes. And Dan talks about this too, right? This is one of the things that he said in Mastermind Talks, and he said it again in at his Idea to Exit event in Toronto. He's just like, just start with a few bullet points and then kind of work on it from there. And every time you go back to it, you add a little bit, you improve a little bit. So we wanted to monitor how many edits were happening on playbooks. Edits is not a sign that people were making mistakes in their playbooks. Edits is a sign that people were listening to the advice, starting with an MVP, minimum viable product of a playbook, and then going back and editing it. Playbooks created by department. This was really cool. So operations was in the lead, an average of 8.4 playbooks per person. Products department in second place, finance in third place. Average views by department, average edits by department. So again, we took the time to pull all this information out of our corporate social media. You could also easily take this out of Google Docs. You just got to care. You got to assign somebody to go and really take it and run with it to be able to pull this information out for you, which really comes back to the next point. Who's doing all this? There's a lot of work happening here, right? Choose a champion. So once leadership gets behind the idea, socializes it, gets the troops pumped for the battle, you really are going to need a clear playbooks champion to keep that momentum through the finish line and beyond. They're the ones that are going to fine tune the process and tailor it to the needs of the company. You know, we really believe strongly here at Tungsten, like a lot of other companies too, it's not about ready, aim, fire. It's ready, fire, aim. You do the minimum amount that you need to create a foundation and set yourself up for success. And then you start pushing it out and tailoring it and iterating on it on the fly as you go through. So what exactly does the playbook champion do, right? I want to get granular here. I want you guys to get some really good ideas. Again, I'm not assuming that everyone's going to copy exactly what we're doing, but I'm hoping that by sharing with you as granular and detailed as possible what we're doing here, that this is going to bring some value to you. So Again, leadership's beyond the idea. You've socialized, you got the troops pumped. What's the champion doing? It's pretty much 5 things that the champion does here at Tungsten. The first one is once you start creating drafts, they need to get pushed into completion, because I kind of skipped over that part, but in our ROC that we established for the quarter, these goals that we had for the quarter, we said we wanted 90 finished playbooks, not 90 playbooks started and in draft mode. We wanted 90 finished playbooks in the first quarter. How is that going to happen? Right? You need a champion who's responsible for going around and reminding people saying, great job creating this first draft. When can you finish it? Because again, our ROC was to have 90 finished playbooks. So the playbook champion is running around and kind of talking to people, monitoring what's going on. By the way, this is not a full-time gig. This is what she does on the side. Amy, who's our playbook champion, she's also on the culture committee, and she handles process documents for onboarding. She's got a very full plate, but she really got excited about playbooks, and she's kind of responsible for running around and monitoring what's going on and helping people to complete it. Second thing is, if you do it right, there's going to be a ton of playbooks created in the first 90 days. So it's important to have quality control. You got to make sure that the playbooks are reflecting the values and best practices in your company. So the playbook champion makes sure that the finished playbooks accurately reflect the way we do things around here, right? So we have these 4 core values in our company. I'm really proud that when we walk around the office, we hear people saying things like, we do things like this here. We don't do things like that here. Like if somebody's gossiping in the company, you'll have somebody say, well, we don't do things like that here. And I love that. But you got to make sure that the playbooks are also really representing the way that we do things around here. So that's the second thing the playbook champion's doing. Third thing is that everyone knows that if they've got questions about playbooks, there's this one person they can talk to who will have or get them the answers. So this is new, right? We're rolling it out. No one really understands exactly what it is. Who's the one person that you can talk to who's going to give you all your answers about playbooks? Playbook champion. Fourth thing, playbook champion listens for problems in the company, right? This creates opportunities to create a backlog of playbooks to be curated. So as the playbook champion is in meetings and they are having conversations with other people in the office, they kind of got their spidey senses tuned and their antennae going at the top, and they're like, that sounds like a really good opportunity for a playbook, right? So we have this backlog of playbooks to be curated, and that's being maintained by the champion. And then the champion can nominate people to create the playbook to solve the problem. Now, the cool thing about this is because we started out by saying that if you're a smart person, you should share what you know with the rest of the team. If you get nominated to create a playbook, is that like, oh man, I got to go create a playbook? No. Actually, what the playbook champion is saying is you're the smartest one. You are the best person to create a playbook to solve this problem. You see how that subtle little shift changes completely people's buy-in to what they're doing with the playbooks? Playbook champion walks up and says, we've got a backlog of playbooks, and starts just like delegating them out. I want you to be able to win on the gamification. I want your name up on the TV as like, a person who's creating more playbooks. Here's a few out of the backlog, take them and run with them. You're the smart person that we need to go create this document. And the last thing is that when you're in a massive flurry of creating playbooks, you need to make sure that you aren't creating overlapping ones, right? So along with making sure all the good ideas we come up with in the company go into backlog, we also have to make sure that the right playbooks are being created by the right people with no overlap. So this helps to keep everyone efficient, and you don't want people to get demoralized around realizing that their playbook was actually like 90% replicated by somebody else. So somebody's kind of just got to stand there as like the orchestrator, administrator, organizer of it. That's really your playbook champion. So this was huge to keeping the momentum going, right? We started with the foundation. We created some motivation through gamification. Now we're keeping the motivation going by appointing a champion. The next thing is experimentation and adaptation. So what does that mean? Well, one of the ideas of our playbook champion, Amy, she realized it might help us hit our goal of 90 playbooks finished, was if people started creating the first drafts while they were performing the task that required a playbook. And I know that this is an idea that Dan had, that he was pushing out to people saying, just actually write the playbook while you're going through it. But full props to Amy. She also came up with that idea on her own. It didn't take people that much longer to perform the task while they're also documenting it. And again, we're telling them, don't worry if your first draft of the playbook is just a few bullet points and a simple checklist at the bottom. At least we'll have something started, and next time you do the task, you can flesh it out just a little bit. So this really helped people to get over the overwhelm. Listening and learning on the fly was really, really important. So our Playbook champion also came up with this idea that every time we did a 5 whys analysis in the company, remember I talked about that earlier? We do these 5 whys whenever something broke or something went wrong. We get these great learnings out of it. It's now the Playbook champion's responsibility to take the deliverables from that 5 whys and make sure that those deliverables must go into a playbook with a clear owner on who will create it. So this is not a case of it just going into the backlog. She's actually taking it and saying, okay, this is clearly something that broke in the company. Here's the 5 whys, the result of it. Who's going to create the playbook? What's going to be in the playbook? Great. Can't wait to see your playbook. Let's go see it done. So this idea of experimenting, adapting, not feeling like it's got to be perfect out of the fly, being willing to go in and make edits and change it, that was a really important piece. And the last step in the framework is improvement and adoption. So our rollout was a 90-day sprint to create the initial library of playbooks. But once you have them, how are you going to make sure that people are using them? Well, we came up with a few ideas for that. One idea was to tap into people's inherent laziness. I mean, I'm extremely lazy, and I'd like to think, like a lot of the studies show, that sometimes the smartest people are also the laziest people. So doing things like putting all the URLs and logins into the beginning of a playbook. So say the playbook is about how to modify a system or how to create a new account for something. Just go ahead and put all the URLs and the logins right in the beginning of the playbook. And then when people want to start a task, they know, oh yeah, all that's in the playbook. Now they've automatically got the playbook up in front of them. Another key piece was we created a culture of accountability, right? What does that look like? Every time there's a mistake that happens in the company, and yes, we still make a lot of mistakes, our default reaction is now to create or edit the corresponding playbook. But now ask yourself, what happens if the problem happens and there's a perfectly good playbook for it? Now, imagine you're the CEO. Most of the people on this webinar are entrepreneurs or CEOs or presidents of their company. Just imagine what that starts to do to the culture of your company. If there's a perfectly good playbook for it, that if it would have been followed, the mistake wouldn't have happened. Here's a perfect way to create a culture of accountability in your company with just a simple question like, why did this mistake happen when the playbook is right there? I mean, this can be super effective. Usually people never want to be in that awkward situation again, and they'll make bloody well sure that they follow the playbook for the task next time. And if they don't, and the same mistake happens again, guess what? You've now got a good, thank you, good rhythm. I like that. Thanks, Mathieu. I am actually looking at the chat. So if you guys have any questions and you want to stop me along the way, we are going to do Q&A at the end, but feel free to kind of stop me midstream anytime you want. If there's something you really want to focus on, or if you want to bounce back to a particular slide, I'll be more than happy to do that. So if they don't follow the playbook and the mistake happens again, this is a clear-cut case for dismissal, right? And Dan talked about this in OHI as well, right? Where he said, all you got to do is go to the employee and say, you're not playing at the level we need in this company. If they're not opening the playbook and they're not following it, then clearly they're just not playing at the level that you need in this company. Then this also encourages ongoing curation, because if the excuse for any mistake is there's no playbook for it, well, then the default answer is, oh, well, go create one. You're the perfect smart person to get it done based on what we just learned from this mistake. So again, you're like encouraging the curation of more and more playbooks. But even with all the hard work that we did to lay the groundwork, I was afraid that there'd be a bunch of people who just wouldn't get behind it. I mean, you just never know when you're getting started. And that's an important sort of side point. You can't let the fear prevent you from just jumping in. And I said, you know what? Even if we get 70% of people behind the idea of playbooks and creating them, that's probably going to be good enough. But I'll tell you, almost everybody has gotten behind playbooks. I mean, the response has just been incredible. He said that gamification, I mean, we're monitoring how many playbooks are being created by people. Most people have created multiple playbooks. And I'm actually going to show you our sort of like master list of playbooks in a little bit, so you can see exactly how many we've been able to create and get an idea for that. But a lot of that probably has to do with the fact that, we did the work. We're aligned around core values. We've got good culture. We really laid the framework and the foundation for what we wanted to do. But the incredible adoption that we had here at Tungsten has actually made me realize something else, rolling out playbooks has an unintended side effect. It kind of gives you an opportunity to root out anyone on the team who's either unwilling or unable to play at the level you need in your company. Because if 95% of your company is getting behind playbooks and 5% aren't, maybe that's the 5% that doesn't belong in your company. And you've just found an objective, standalone way to identify those people. This is something I'm really passionate about when it comes to culture. Dave Ramsey, just to digress for a minute, he talks about how good companies are the ones that try to build a stable of thoroughbred horses, but every once in a while a donkey sneaks into your company. And you're always looking for ways as the CEO or as management to identify the donkeys so that every once in a while you can perform regular donkeyectomies, as he likes to call it. So, of course, in our company, again, going back to our core values of good people, we're not just summarily firing people. We do a lot of coaching. We do a lot of mentoring. We try to get people on board. We try to give them lots of reminders. But at the end of the day, you can lead a horse to water, but you just can't make him drink. So I've actually found that this is becoming an interesting way to identify where you've got potential problems within your company of people that maybe just aren't playing at the level that you need. So now I'm going to take a quick minute to show you guys some playbooks. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the benefits as we go through this. So just real quick, 1 second, I'm going to switch my screen share. Switch my screen share to Google Chrome. There, that's working. All right, so here's a few sample playbooks that were actually curated by our staff. So Ben created this one. You see here really clearly, again, this is following Dan's framework. I haven't spent a lot of time going in and talking about how to build a playbook because Dan already did that, right? He gave everybody the templates. If you want them, all you got to do is reach out to him or reach out to Moxie and she'll make sure that you get them as well. But really simple, like the purpose, definition of done, final checks, your QA check at the end, nice images in here. Here's another one that was created, how to create a test customer or manual lead. Again, the purpose, definition of success, everyone's really clear. And again, making it really easy for people, tapping into their laziness, lots of screenshots with these arrows, right? All these errors, all the different steps that you need to go through, circles and arrows around things, highlighting the different fields you need to look at. And then at the bottom, you've got your final check to make sure that this was actually, oh, here's Amy, our playbook champion. Nice work. And then another one that we had, again, Aline created this one, purpose, definition of done. You see how they're all following Dan's template. Every single one is following the exact same template that Dan gave to all of us. We're inserting screenshots, putting arrows around, showing people exactly what it is they need to do. I mean, I just love this stuff. There's a massive, massive amount of curation that's been going on. So if we go into playbooks, by the way, we're using a corporate social media called Jive. This kind of comes back to part of the debate period again. I was really convinced that what we wanted to do was use Google Docs. That's what Dan really recommends, right? When he talks about playbooks. So I'm saying to everyone, we should use Google Docs and use Google Sheets with the links, just like Dan said. And part of the debate process was leadership coming back and saying, actually, it's going to be much better for our company if we use Jive, because we already have a bunch of reporting systems where we can suck data out of the back end and go and update it. So all those screens that you saw and those charts and stuff, we get a tremendous amount of data out of the back end of Jive, which we can then go and manually update those spreadsheets, manually update those sheets. But you can do the exact same thing in Google Docs. You don't feel like you need to go and have a tool like Jive. It's just the reason why I talk about this is that part of the debate is give and take, right? I'm the CEO of the company, but I'm not just going to sit there and micromanage everyone and tell them exactly how we're going to do this. This is part of getting buy-in. I want everyone to be really excited about what we're doing. And so when they made a really good argument for using our corporate social media instead of Google Docs, I backed off. I'm like, okay, guys, if that's the way you want to do it, great. So here's a list of all the playbooks, the master list of playbooks that we've curated in the company. You can understand, we just started this project about 110, 120 days ago. We set a goal of creating 90 playbooks, 90 completed playbooks in the first 90 days. We actually blew that out of the water and created more than 125 in the first 90 days. You think people are excited about this and behind it? And everyone loves it. I'm going to talk about the benefits and why people love it so much in a couple minutes. But this is our master list. You'll notice as well at the bottom of every playbook, just like Dan recommends in Google Docs, There's always a link back. There's tags that we have in here. There's always links back to like further documents and further materials. And if you talk about a glossary or something like that, well, there's a playbook for the glossary. I could show you other playbooks that have that stuff, but maybe we'll save that for the Q&A. So I'm just gonna change my screen share again here. Go back to my deck. Hey guys. Where am I at here? Perfect, got it back. All right, so that's a few playbooks. So the idea is, again, this is the smartest guy in the room, right? That's what the image is supposed to be. You're telling your smart people, this is your opportunity to show people exactly how smart you are, why you're the perfect person to go create the playbook. It also gives your employees an opportunity to show that they're good people, that they're team players, that they're really supporting the rest of the team by creating these playbooks. I can't emphasize enough how important that is as far as the pitch for getting this to roll out. So what are some of the benefits? I want you guys to be super pumped and motivated about Dan's playbook framework. I want to talk about some of the specific benefits that have happened in the company. Real quick, we're going to rip right through these. First of all, is ownership and accountability. We talked a little bit about this before. Every company I know wants more ownership and accountability within their team. So like we discussed just a few minutes ago, the QA component of Dan's awesome playbook framework guarantees accountability. If a mistake happens and there's no playbook, great, go create the playbook. If a mistake happens and there is a playbook, why didn't you follow the playbook? And you usually only have to say that once. Second thing is institutional knowledge. This was huge for me. I mean, I had a meeting with my staff a week ago, and they started talking about a certain type of report that we needed to run in the company, and they were brainstorming it all out themselves. And I'm like, oh my gosh, guys, I'm so embarrassed, but would you believe that we actually created this suite of reports back in 2007? And it made me sick to my stomach. I mean, so much time and effort and work, and the engineering department and the programmers and brainstorming out what we needed in these reports and designing them. And the reports were there kind of like collecting digital dust. Nobody had even logged in and used them in 2 years because the employees that created those documents back in 2007 weren't with the company anymore. And the new people who came in were like, oh, if we have this problem in the company, if we only had this one report. I'm like, oh my God, stop the insanity. We're recreating over and over and over again the same thing. So now institutional knowledge. It's like you're creating a shared brain with these playbooks that anyone can tap into. It's a collective intelligence as opposed to individual intelligence. And you can just imagine how much easier this makes onboarding in your company when someone new comes in. Another one that I'm a huge fan of, fiercely protecting brain time. So there's a lot of studies out there that'll tell you that thinking like willpower is a finite resource. You wake up every day, you only have a certain amount of hit points, for example, to use like a role-playing game analogy of say creativity or brain power. Playbooks lets you build a business that doesn't need to think in order to make the business run efficiently. And that means that your people can apply all of their thinking to the big problems that are going to take the company to the next level. This frees you from the mundane and saves all your thinking for the creative stuff. So remember the first complaint that my COO had when we talked about this is he's like, if the work that we're doing can be put into a playbook, then we shouldn't be doing it, right? I'm like, yeah, exactly. But the problem is we had all these smart people who didn't have a process, who were figuring out on the fly how to do all this stuff. Now they don't have to apply all of those hit points of creativity and brain power to how to do stuff. Does that mean that they become dumb people, that they're not smart? No, what it means is they can apply all their smarts and their intelligence to other big problems in the company. And we're feeling like this whole wave of like creativity and positive energy coming out of the team. Another thing is well-written playbooks are like a co-pilot in your plane. So the person executing the task is the pilot, but the playbook kind of runs the pilot through a checklist to make sure they haven't missed anything. Now, there's an interesting story behind this. Surgeons, initially resisted pre and post-surgery checklists when they were implemented decades ago. They said, we're smart enough to know what we need to do. We don't need the checklist. But after they started imposing checklists on the surgeons, deaths and complications were reduced dramatically after checklists were in place. So even the smartest people in the world, like brain surgeons, sometimes need to be reminded to wash their hands, right? Playbooks just makes it automatic. so you can focus on what you're really good at. And again, these are actual takeaways and benefits that we felt in our company, right? I'm not giving you some sort of fluffy idea that's subjective. Oh, it should do this and it should do that. No, this is actually what it's been doing in our company. I love this quote. This is a kind of a rip off of one of Dave Ramsey's quotes, where he says that a unified team of B players will crush a disunited team of A players any day of the week. How do you unify those B players? I mean, look, we all want A players in a company. I feel like we've got pretty much everybody in here is A players, but look, even B players can give you A player performance if there's a playbook for it, especially if that playbook was written by an A player and curated by a bunch of different people, right? Each bringing their perspective to it. Again, we're creating that collective. We really love the expression here at Tungsten that, by Peter Drucker, you can't manage what you don't measure, which, like most good quotes, he actually stole from a scientist who lived a couple of hundred years earlier, Lord Kelvin, who created the Kelvin scale of measuring temperature. He actually said, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So playbooks allow us to measure our productivity, which in turn allows us to continuously optimize or improve it. And the last benefit, when work is being done by smart people with no process, I like to compare the smart person to like a glass, and the work that they're doing is like liquid in the glass, right? So their impact is here today in a current form, but what happens when the glass is taken away? The water, the liquid inside completely loses its shape. All of that smartness that smart person put into that task is gone. Playbooks actually allow those smart people to mold the work like clay, so that even when they remove themselves from the task, it retains what they've put into it. And even if it's that same smart person coming back to the task a second time, they don't have to think hard about what to do next time, right? Because it's already there. They've molded that clay once. And if they want, they can continue putting time and energy into it, but they only spend that time on tweaking, improving, optimizing it, so that ideally every time a playbook is touched by a smart person, they leave an impression or an improvement somewhere behind, making it a little bit better every time. So again, just a quick review, those challenges that we talked about. People feel like, we can do this just with a wiki. It's going to create bureaucracy. It's going to make us slow. Those don't actually hold water. It's actually going to do completely the opposite when it comes to bureaucracy and slow, and a wiki just doesn't cut it. And the framework, again, real quick, you got to debate and socialize. You got to create some gamification. You got to appoint the champion. You want to experiment. You want to adapt. And you want to be able to have ongoing improvement and adoption. All right, that's it. I'm going to give you guys some sample playbooks. You can actually download some of the ones. Anybody who wants them, you can have them. They're going to go along with the recording of this, but I want to open it up real quick for Q&A. That took a little bit longer than I expected, 50 minutes. Wow. Well, actually, we started a little bit late. So any questions on this that I can answer for you guys? I can actually unmute anybody, but if it's probably easier if you just throw some into the chat. If anybody's got any questions, any slides you want to go back to, any questions that you have about what we're doing with playbooks at Tungsten. Super helpful, glad. Again, I can't say enough about Dan and his framework. And I knew that it was probably going to be good. I suspected that this is something that we really need, but I had no idea. No idea how good this was going to go. So I'm curious, why screenshots over video, like video screen recordings? That's a really good question. I think that absolutely we could do the screen recordings, but how those would get embedded into an actual Google Doc or into our corporate social media, I don't know. But you could just link out to them, right? So if you posted it on YouTube or Vimeo, and Sylvia, I know when you and I were chatting about this before, you mentioned that you actually walk through and screen record yourself doing a task before you send it over to your executive assistant or anything like that, and that kind of allows her to create the playbook for it. Right, exactly. Editing them along the way. There you go. So Amy just jumped in and said exactly the same answer. Amy's our playbook champion, and she jumped in for the webinar. So you've got the guru right here who's actually making the magic happen. If anyone wants to ask questions, Amy can jump in too. So Amy says videos are harder to edit. And yeah, that's why we're doing it with screenshots, multiple screenshots in it. So you guys embed them in your Google Wiki on Google Sites. Interesting. Like it. You know what? Again, it doesn't really matter. I don't think every single company that rolls out playbooks is going to do it a little bit differently. And that's okay. We should, right? You've got to tailor this to your own organization. The most important thing is that you do it, right? Because I'm absolutely convinced that there's huge value that comes out of this. So hopefully you guys agree. Yeah, you know what? That's another really good point. One of the principles of Dan's playbook framework is that there's multiple levels of readership. Again, I didn't cover that because Dan already talks about it, but just real quick, there's this idea that you want everybody to use playbooks all the time, even if they're an expert. Even the expert who's done it 1,000 times has to open the playbook. The only way they're going to do that is if there's a way that they can skip through it. So the way that it works for experts is they glance through the screenshots, they go to the bottom, and they just do the QA. They do the QA piece. They make sure that they got the desired result, right? They do that final checks piece that Dan talks about in his playbooks, and you saw that in all of our playbooks at the bottom. So an expert goes through, they don't need to look at the different steps. They don't need to look at the charts. They're not going to watch this long video. They're just going to go down to the bottom, go through the final checks, and make sure that they got the desired outcome. So there you go. Cool. Love the little debate going in the chat room. That's awesome, guys. Any other questions about playbooks, what we've rolled out, how we do it, where we've had some challenges? This has not moved in a straight line for us. I hope that I was able to explain some of that to you guys before anybody, before the majority of the employees even heard about playbooks for the first time. We had been debating it behind the scenes, behind closed doors with leadership for weeks. And I think that that was a really important piece of just like hashing it out, debating it, arguing, thinking about it, having everyone sleep on it, come back and keep on bringing it up. And that's kind of like the CEO. There's a joke that, you know, the CEO is the chief energizing officer, right? So sometimes you got to be the energizer bunny. You got to be the one to really kind of push, push, push. Then if you get buy-in, all your smart people just take it and run with it. I'm not the one who's creating the playbooks, right? All right, a couple questions here. Have you come across any challenges with people finding what they need? Yes, absolutely. We have had challenges with that, which is why we started tagging playbooks. So you might have noticed, I'm going to switch over the video feed. Switch over again to one of our playbooks. You'll notice that we've tagged our playbooks. This makes them a lot easier to find. So as you're searching for something, and again, if you're having a hard time finding something, what are you going to do? You're probably going to talk to the playbook champion. You're going to ask the playbook champion, why is there no playbook for this? Playbook champion is going to tell you, you're right, there's not, let's go create one and make sure that there's no overlap with other people who are already working on it. Or they're going to be like, oh, the playbook does exist. Let's go in and put some tags on it so it's easier for you to find next time. So tagging was a really important thing that Amy worked on with the team, and she's constantly working on editing the tags and making them easier to find. But again, hopefully the names as well are fairly intuitive, and the master list, the way that it's organized, again, I don't want to get too much into that because Dan covers a lot of that about how to link out off of a master checklist and link out by department and kind of make it easy for people to find that way. Hopefully that works. Do we ask contractors to build them too, like people you have working very sporadically? Amy, maybe you can answer that question for us. I don't think that we have, but I can tell you we're absolutely gonna, because I loved this idea that Dan gave to us. He did this at Mastermind Talks in Ojai, and he said it again briefly in Toronto, is he even gets people like his videographer, right, who's a contractor, to write a playbook for how he does what he does. And sometimes the contractors dig in their heels and say, well, I'm kind of giving my proprietary information. And the idea is like, well, if you want the job, you've got to do this. And I'm going to pay you for the time that it takes to create the playbook, but it's either do the playbook or you don't get the gig, you don't get the job. And the idea is that now you're paying these contractors not for what they're doing, but how they're doing it. You're paying them for the unique value that they bring to the process and the task. But if they get hit by a bus, somebody else can pick up right where they left off and take over on the stuff. So I'm absolutely sold hook, line, and sinker on the idea of having outside contractors fill out playbooks as well. But I think we just had such a massive amount of curation that needed to happen internally that I know that was our primary focus. I don't know if we've actually gotten to that point yet, but I can guarantee you that we will if we haven't. hopefully that answers your question. All right, guys. Well, we had booked this for 1 hour. It looks like we got about 3 minutes left. We did start a little bit late. So if anyone else has got any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. If not, we can wrap up a couple minutes early. And oh, there you go. We do have playbooks on how to work with Fiverr. So maybe we haven't actually gotten the Fiverr people to create the playbooks and what they do. Again, most of the playbooks that we're creating are for recurring tasks, right? So when it's something that needs to get done over and over and over again in your company, that's not to say that there's no value in having playbooks for more one-off things, but certainly the Playbook Champion is focusing on recurring tasks and things that are breaking in the company. So, all right, guys, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was awesome to have you guys here. There's going to be a recording for this. I know there's a few people. Oh, I want to give a quick shout out as well to Floyd from the Mastermind Talks community. He's the one who originally pushed me to put together something. He said, I really want to see what's going on with playbooks inside of your company, which then I decided to do the webinar for everybody. Unfortunately, Floyd was tied up in another meeting, so he wasn't able to be here and hang out with us, but I just wanted to give a shout out and say thank you, Floyd, for pushing me to go and do this. And I hope you really love the recording when you see it. Any more questions, guys? Email me anytime. Hit me on Facebook in the communities. And I'm more than happy to jump in and share anything else with you guys. And I'm going to share some of the specific playbooks in there as well. Awesome. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Cheers.